So sports. So dumb, right? What's the point? Life is going to go on no matter what. In the grand scheme of things, does any of it really matter? Thoughts like these perpetuate the commonly held belief that sports have no material effect on the so-called things that matter. Derek Jeter's overall batting average does not address any of the issues surrounding global climate change. Income equality has nothing to do with where the Lakers rank in the overall NBA playoff standings. And come November of next year, I can say with absolute certainty that our next president will not be determined by Peyton Manning's quarterback rating. In other words, competitive sports supposedly have no real-life bearing on our daily lives. Thus, from that perspective, they are, in a word, inconsequential. I think some of us, at least, can agree on that. However, bear in mind that this is just one interpretation. Is it a valid one? Perhaps. But it's not the only interpretation. In point of fact, competitive sports constitute an integral part of our national identity. I've therefore taken it upon myself to make the case that every last person who calls America their home owes it to themselves as responsible citizens to take personal stock in the current state of professional sports. Forgive me if this seems a bit presumptuous on my part. Before you dismiss this proposal, I kindly ask you to consider the following with an open mind. To put it mildly, we are not a sports school. On the other hand, although this is true, perhaps we're looking at this in the wrong light. For the next several minutes, let's consider sports as not simply a refuge from the mundane concerns of daily life, to quote an encyclopedic entry from Racial and Ethnic Relations in America. Instead, why not examine them through a cultural, political, and sociological lens? With that said, the following presentation is an attempt on my part to refute the common fallacy that sports are, as the saying goes, just a game. First, I will acknowledge a few of the reasons why there is a valid basis for such skepticism. Then, I will provide the counter-argument for these reasons using real-life case studies. Ultimately, my goal is not to convert any of you into sports fanatics. On the contrary, it is merely to offer an alternative perspective on the concept of sports as culture that I hope will arouse your interest as well as merit your consideration. Let's begin by looking at why many of us hold sports in such low regard. Stated plainly, the belief that sports don't matter is largely a consequence of big business. Today's media industry is, if nothing else, profit-driven, owned and operated by some of the most influential media conglomerates on the planet. And as a general rule, the newspapers they sell that net the most revenue tend to be the ones that sensationalize and embellish their stories the most. Thus, judging by the likes of a sensational news source such as the New York Post, for example, there are legitimate grounds to be cynical. Consider this image in its headline, published in the New York Post on February 9, 2009, of the always controversial Alex Rodriguez, baseball megastar of the New York Yankees and frequently targeted scapegoat of the press, who had at the time admitted to illegally using steroids in a public address. By contrast, the New York Times printed the following image in its coverage of the same story that day, accompanied by the following title. Now, the disparities on display are obvious. The Times coverage features an objective account of the scandal as evidenced by a straightforward, unbiased headline alongside an appropriate photograph, whereas the Post depicts the situation as a farce, caricaturizing Rodriguez by printing a crude play on words in large, bold lettering, no less, beside an unflattering picture. For our purposes, the problem boils down to a matter of numbers, specifically on a national scale. According to a recent census generated by the Alliance of Audited Media, Americans are more likely to encounter the satirized version of the story than the serious one. What does this demonstrate? By comparing different representations of someone with a public persona as large as A-Rod's, we can glean a great deal about how the popular press can distort public opinion when it uses its influence irresponsibly. Now that we've identified one of the primary reasons a significant portion of Americans think of sports as pointless and superfluous, let's examine how this premise is often misleading. Based on our analysis of the A-Rod scandal, we can safely establish that our dismissive tendencies stem not from the sports themselves, but by the lack of ethical treatment they receive in the popular presses. While there's no denying that absurd tabloids like the ones on display here make names for themselves by perpetuating sensational rumors, the assumption that all media use similar marketing tactics is challenged by the abundance of socially, politically, and culturally pertinent sports journalism readily at our disposal. In Sports Journalism as Moral and Ethical Discourse, a fascinating article published in the Journal of Mass Media Ethics, Thomas P. Oates and John Pauley conclude with a similar appeal to their readers. They write, "While the games themselves may be of little consequence, the stories told about them routinely give shape to the deeply felt communal values, including the value of self-sacrifice and the possibility of group achievement." There's more, but for the sake of time, I'm going to cut it short there. But what this passage undoubtedly touches upon many of the theoretical underpinnings that make sports a crucial element of American society. However, it means very little without substantial evidence to support it. Which leads me to the following examples of important intersections throughout history between sports, culture, politics, and American society at large. The first speaks for itself. Jackie Robinson. In 1947, he paved the way for racial desegregation in Major League Baseball. 20 years later, in the 1968 Summer Games, track and field Olympians Tommy Smith and John Carlos famously celebrated their victory by raising their fists in the air as a gesture to the Black Power movement in America during the Civil Rights era. In 1991, Magic Johnson's famous announcement in which he publicly revealed his positive HIV status paved amazing roads for research and funding to find a cure for this deadly epidemic. Not only did it demonstrate that seemingly indestructible figures like Magic Johnson were susceptible to the virus, but the fact that he was widely known to be heterosexual proved that AIDS did not exclusively target the gay community or IV drug users. Another somewhat recent example, 2001 World Series, at which George Bush threw the ceremonial first pitch to commemorate the victims of 9/11, just weeks after September 11 terrorist attacks. And, even more current, sports play a fundamental role in the LGBT movement, as we can see in this example, when Michael Sam, a college football player in Missouri, received the ESPY Award for Courage for defying sports homophobic culture by publicly declaring that he was gay. Similarly, the following year, being this year, Caitlyn Jenner received the same award at the ESPYs for Courage. The world-famous triathlete and now reality television star Jenner received this award for her influence and impact on the transgendered population in the U.S. and abroad. And yet, iconic moments like the ones we've just addressed make up a mere fraction of sports' overall impact on our political and civic landscape. Nonetheless, it doesn't take such a comprehensive body of knowledge to recognize why sports matter, regardless of whether we enjoy them or not. All it takes to grasp this concept is a willingness to recognize that they are not simply some superfluous collection of players, teams, games, and statistics. Thank you.